The first time Grant Mercer told Camille Brooks that she needed to smile more for the clients, she wrote it down. That was what Camille did with useful information. She wrote it down, thought about it, and figured out how to get better. She had been at Mercer Lane Consulting for 4 years, long enough to know that doing excellent work and being recognized for excellent work were not always the same thing. Camille had taken care of the first. She prepared before anyone asked her to prepare. She remembered the numbers. She knew which clients wanted the answer first and which needed to understand how she reached it. When something went wrong, Camille did not hide behind an email or send a junior employee into the room to absorb the anger. She walked in herself, explained what had happened, told the truth about what could be fixed, and then fixed it. Clients trusted her and her team trusted her, but still, when promotions came around, somebody else always seemed to move a little faster. So when Grant called her into his office one Friday afternoon and told her senior leadership had been discussing her future, Camille sat down with a legal pad on her lap and listened. "You're one of the strongest strategists we've got," he said. "The Harrison turnaround alone put you on everybody's radar. Thank you. You're ready for more." Camille felt herself sit a little straighter, and then Grant leaned back. "There is one thing." Her pen was ready before he finished the sentence. "You need to work on warmth." Camille looked up. "With clients," he explained, "nobody questions your competence, but sometimes you're so focused on giving people the right answer that you forget they need to feel good about getting it from you." Camille wrote down one word: warmth. Grant smiled. "There, that's exactly what I mean." "What?" "That serious face." Camille laughed a little and Grant pointed toward her. That's what I'm talking about. More of that. Smile more for the clients." She left his office grateful. That was the part Camille would remember later. She had not felt insulted. She had felt coached. Her mother had spent 27 years waking before sunrise for work, and one of her favorite sayings had followed Camille into adulthood. If there's something you don't know, learn it. If there's something you don't do well, practice it. So Camille practiced. She smiled when clients entered conference rooms. She stayed a little longer after meetings. She asked about children and vacations instead of returning immediately to her office. She learned that Mr. Keller's daughter was applying to law school and that Diane Morrison's Labrador had eaten part of her kitchen floor. Some of it genuinely helped. A difficult client who had barely spoken to her before began calling Camille directly. Another told Grant that Camille had become his favorite person at the firm because she never wasted his time, but somehow never made him feel rushed. At Camille's next review, Grant praised her improvement in relationship management, and 6 months later, she was promoted. Dear hearts, if you have ever been told that cruelty was harmless simply because no one raised a hand, subscribe and become part of the Velvet Circle, a community where women's and girls' experiences are believed, named, and taken seriously. Her mother cried when Camille called, and her father told half the people he knew. Camille bought herself an expensive pair of shoes, felt guilty about it, then stopped feeling guilty when she saw the raise on her first paycheck. The promotion seemed to prove something important, that Grant had identified a weakness, and Camille had corrected it, and then her career had moved. So when the suggestions continued, she listened. At first they were small enough that she never thought to connect them. Grant asked her to attend a client dinner even though her portion of the work had ended hours earlier, and she pushed back a little because she said, "I've got Harrison revisions due tomorrow." And Grant smiled and said, "Do them in the morning. You have to stop treating the relationship part of the job like it happens after the real work." Camille heard instruction, and so she went. Another time, Grant glanced at the navy suit she wore to a reception and said, "You know this isn't a board meeting, right?" Camille looked down at herself. "What does that mean?" "Nothing. You just dress very seriously." He walked away before she could decide whether she had been criticized, and the next reception she wore a softer blouse. And someone complimented her, Camille remembered. There was the client who told her she would be dangerous if she ever learned how to relax, and everybody laughed. Then Camille smiled and redirected the conversation. Grant praised her afterward. There was the executive who asked whether she had a boyfriend, then announced that a woman who worked as much as Camille could never keep a husband anyway, and Camille laughed it off too. Another successful evening. Over the next few years, she learned to move conversations without making anyone realize she had moved them. She could turn a comment about her appearance into a question about quarterly projections. She knew when to laugh, when to redirect, when to pretend she had not heard something, and when to save disagreement until everyone else had left the room. People called it polish, Grant called it executive presence, and Camille called it getting better. She was getting better, wasn't she? Her title improved, and her salary improved, and her accounts became more important. By 34, Camille was one of Mercer Lane's most successful associate directors and supervised younger employees. Yet if someone had asked what she still needed to improve, Camille would have answered without hesitation. I need to be better with clients. She believed this while clients asked for her by name, and she believed it while saving accounts other people had almost lost. She believed it because every compliment still seemed to contain a small reminder that the person she naturally was in a room required adjustment. Then Ethan Cole joined the leadership team. Ethan was good at his job and Camille respected him, but he was also blunt. He frowned while people talked. He interrupted when he thought someone was wrong. At dinners, if Ethan had nothing to say, he simply ate, and she noticed that nobody coached him about warmth, but did not make much of it. Then one afternoon, a client proposed an implementation schedule Camille knew was impossible. She was already preparing the diplomatic version of no, acknowledge the urgency, explain the limitations, offer an alternative, when Ethan spoke. No. The room went quiet. The executive stared at him. Ethan didn't smile. That timeline isn't realistic. If we tell you it is, we'll be lying to you. Camille waited for Grant to step in. The client stared at Ethan for another second. Fine, give me one that is. The meeting continued. Later, Camille passed Grant's office and heard him talking to Ethan. You know what clients like about you? Ethan laughed. Probably nothing. They know exactly where they stand. Grant clapped him on the shoulder. You don't bend. That's why they respect you. Camille kept walking. The sentence followed her all the way back to her office. You don't bend. That's why they respect you. She sat down and stared at an email without reading it. For years, Camille had been learning how to bend without appearing bent at all. She thought about asking Grant why directness was strength when Ethan did it and a development issue when she did. She didn't. Ethan had a different personality, and maybe clients responded differently to men. Maybe that wasn't fair, but unfair did not automatically mean abusive. Camille had become very skilled at finding explanations for things that made her uncomfortable. Richard Vail made those explanations harder. Vail Industries was one of Mercer Lane's largest clients. Richard had recently taken over from his father and was charming in the effortless way of someone who had spent most of his life being welcomed wherever he went. Camille liked him at first, and that mattered. Richard remembered junior employees' names. He sent lunch to entire teams after difficult meetings. He asked people about themselves. And he was funny. The first few times Camille laughed around him, she genuinely meant it. The first time Richard touched her, she barely noticed. A hand on her shoulder after a presentation. 2 seconds. The next time, his hand touched the upper part of her back while they moved through a crowded restaurant, and Camille stepped forward. Nothing happened. At another dinner, his fingers rested on the back of her chair, and later, his hand landed on her shoulder while he leaned closer to hear her. Then one evening, as a group left a private dining room, Richard placed his palm against the small of Camille's back, and this time it stayed there. Camille's body answered before her mind did. She stepped sideways, and Richard's hand fell away. She did not accuse him. She did not glare. She did not stop the conversation. She just moved 6 inches because she did not want his hand on her body, and Richard noticed. Grant noticed too. The following morning, Grant appeared in Camille's doorway. Got a minute? He closed his office door after she entered. Richard thought things got a little strange last night. Camille frowned. When? At the end. He said you pulled away from him. The confusion disappeared. Oh, his hand was on my back. Grant nodded. And? Camille stared at him. And I didn't want his hand on my back. Camille, nobody is saying you did anything wrong. Then why are we talking about it? Because Richard noticed. Noticed what? That you moved away. Camille felt the conversation changing shape around her. He noticed I didn't want him touching me. Don't turn it into that. Into what? Grant lowered his voice. Richard likes you. He respects you. He asks for you specifically. Do you understand how valuable that relationship is? I moved away from his hand. And I'm not saying you couldn't. Then what are you saying? Grant exhaled. You're experienced enough now to understand that you don't have to make everything a moment. Camille replayed the restaurant in her mind. I moved 6 inches. I know. So how did I make it a moment? Because he noticed. Something inside Camille became very still. Grant softened his voice. Nobody is asking you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. She waited. I am asking you not to make a client feel like he's done something wrong. Camille looked at him. There it was. She could not yet name the entire pattern, but she could hear the impossible rule. Richard could do something that made Camille uncomfortable, but Camille simply could not respond in a way that made Richard uncomfortable about doing it. So, if he's touching me and I don't want him touching me, what am I supposed to make him feel? Grant's expression hardened. This is what I mean when I tell you to use judgment. Camille left his office angry, but by lunchtime she had begun reducing the conversation. Maybe Grant had handled it badly, and maybe Richard had been embarrassed, or maybe a hand on someone's back was too small to turn into something serious, and maybe senior client work required finesse. By the end of the day, Camille had almost convinced herself that nothing important had happened. Then things changed when Nadia Price joined her team. Nadia was 26, newly promoted, bright, enthusiastic, and so nervous about her first major presentation that she arrived 40 minutes early with printed backup copies of documents available on 3 laptops. Camille laughed when she saw them. You know we already have those? I know. And Grant has a set. I know. So what exactly are those? Insurance. Camille smiled. You're going to be fine. Nadia was better than fine. She knew her material. She listened. She answered questions without rushing. After the meeting, Camille went back toward the conference room for a notebook she had forgotten and heard Grant speaking before she reached the doorway. Excellent work today. Nadia thanked him. You've got real potential here. Camille smiled. Then Grant said, one thing. Camille stopped walking. You need to smile more for the clients. Nadia gave a small laugh. I thought I was smiling. You were. Just give them more of it. You're young. You don't want people reading concentration as attitude. Camille stood in the hallway. Nothing dramatic happened. No one raised a voice. But suddenly she was 30 years old again, a legal pad on her lap, writing down the word warmth. And for the first time, Camille did not see the years behind her as separate incidents. Then she saw a road. The smiling, the dinners, the clothing suggestions, the jokes that she learned to absorb, then the personal comments, the touching and the warning not to make Richard feel that he had done something wrong. And Nadia was standing at the beginning of the road, a road that Camille knew, and she knew where it would lead. That night, she opened her laptop at her dining table and began reading 6 years of her career backward, performance reviews first, continued development of client warmth, then significant improvement in relationship management. Then particularly effective with high-demand personalities. Then continue developing interpersonal pliability with high-value stakeholders. Camille stopped. Pliability. She searched her email. Great job tonight. You really know how to soften Paul. Wear something less boardroom tomorrow. Richard specifically asked for you. Let's not disappoint him. Then the message after the dinner. Need you to smooth this over. He's too important to lose over a misunderstanding. Camille read that one 3 times, and the apartment became quiet around her. No one had ever written, your career depends on tolerating inappropriate behavior from important men. A did not have to, but the rewards had been clear. Attend the dinner and get visibility, and handle the difficult client and get the account. Be easy and that will let you move up. Push back and suddenly the conversation became judgment, warmth, flexibility, leadership potential. A woman could technically say no while being taught very carefully what no might cost. Camille closed the laptop. Recognition did not make her feel powerful. It made her sad. She thought about the years she had spent checking her face before meetings, wondering whether serious looked angry, and whether direct sounded cold or tired looked unfriendly. Whether every moment of discomfort was simply evidence that she had not yet become sophisticated enough for the room. And for the first time, Camille wondered whether she had ever been bad with clients at all. 2 days later, she called Lena Walsh. Lena had left Mercer Lane 2 years earlier. The explanation around the office had been burnout, followed quietly by words like difficult and not leadership material. They met at a coffee shop across town. It took Camille 10 minutes to ask the question, "Did anything ever happen with one of your clients?" That question caused Lena's expression to change. He wasn't Richard. Camille felt her stomach drop. Who? Gerald Foster. Then Lena told her. Different client, same progression. He liked having Lena at dinners. Complimented her appearance. Became overly familiar. One evening he kissed her cheek and held his face against hers after she tried to move. Lena pushed him away. The next morning her manager told her she had embarrassed an important client. What did you do? Camille asked. I reported it. Camille blinked. You did? Lena looked at her. Yes, what happened? Everybody agreed Gerald could be overly familiar. Everybody agreed nobody should have to feel uncomfortable. And then Lena gave a tired little laugh. But somehow I ended up being coached. And then the account disappeared. Then another, and by her next review, they questioned her resilience and stakeholder skills. Within a year, Lena left. Why didn't anybody know? Some people knew. Lena looked directly at her. They just knew the version that made it easier to keep working there. Camille remembered believing that version. I'm sorry. I know. Lena placed her hand on the table beside Camille's, not on Camille's hand, beside it, leaving Camille the choice to close the distance. The smallness of that gesture almost undid her. Camille went back to work the next morning, but did not confront Grant. She prepared. She saved emails and reviews. She wrote down dates. She requested the company's harassment, retaliation, client conduct, and promotion policies. She documented conversations while she could still remember the words, and she watched. She noticed which women were praised for handling difficult personalities, which women Grant encouraged to attend dinners, how often women heard the word warmth, how rarely Ethan did. She watched Nadia begin smiling before answering questions, even when nothing was funny. That hurt most. 3 weeks later, Grant appeared in Camille's doorway. Veiled dinner Thursday, 7:30. I won't be attending. Grant stopped. What? My work on the account is complete. I won't be at dinner. He stepped inside. This isn't optional. Camille looked at him. Why? Because Richard specifically asked for you. That isn't a work reason. Grant closed the office door. Camille, this is not the moment to become difficult. Difficult. The same word that had followed Lena out the door. Grant lowered his voice. Your name is being discussed for regional director. Camille's heart beat harder. Regional director. The title she had worked toward for years. The title her mother would celebrate, and the title Grant knew she wanted. For a moment, Camille could see the old road perfectly. Do this one thing. Don't create a problem. Don't be difficult now. The reward is right there. She folded her hands so Grant would not see them trembling. Is my promotion dependent on attending dinner with Richard? No one said that. I'm asking. Don't do this. Is it? No. Camille nodded. Then I won't be attending. You are making this unnecessarily difficult. The old reflex rose inside her. Smile. Soften. Make him understand. Camille let it pass. I spent 6 years believing I wasn't good with clients. Grant frowned. What does that have to do with this? Everything. She looked at him. You told me to smile more, be warmer, dress less seriously. You praised me when I laughed off personal comments. You sent me to dinners because certain clients liked having me there. And when Richard touched me and I moved away, you made my boundary a problem with my judgment. That is not what happened. It is. You are taking years of professional coaching and twisting it into something ugly. For once, Grant's certainty did not become Camille's uncertainty. I was already good with clients. He shook his head. Camille continued. I listened to them. I knew their businesses. I told them the truth. I protected their interests, even when the truth wasn't what they wanted to hear. Camille, you didn't teach me how to work with clients. You taught me how much discomfort I was expected to hide so they could stay comfortable. Grant's jaw tightened. Be very careful about what you're accusing me of. Camille felt something inside herself settle. There had been a time when that tone could make her abandon her own understanding. Not anymore. I am being careful. She touched the folder on her desk. That's why I documented it. Grant stopped speaking. The silence grew. Camille did not rescue him from it. That afternoon, she filed the formal complaint. What followed was not clean. There were interviews, questions about dates, questions about why Camille had kept attending dinners, why she had laughed at comments that made her uncomfortable, why she had not complained sooner. Grant described everything as professional coaching. Richard said he had never intended to make Camille uncomfortable. Camille kept returning to what she knew. I moved because I did not want him touching me. I was told not to make him feel as though he had done anything wrong. My advancement was raised when I refused another dinner. Then Lena spoke. Another former employee agreed to speak too. Then another. Different clients, different years, the same pattern. Grant was placed on leave during the investigation. Mercer Lane changed its client conduct procedures and created a reporting route outside an employee's direct management chain. Richard's account was reviewed and reassigned. None of that erased what had happened, but it could change what happened next. 6 months later, Mercer Lane offered Camille the regional director position. She asked for 2 days. Then she went home, made tea, and sat at the same dining table where she had once opened. 6 years of emails looking for proof that she had imagined everything. Regional director. She had wanted those words for years. Her mother would celebrate. Her father would tell everyone he knew. Camille smiled at that. Then she asked herself a question. Do I want this? Other questions arrived immediately. Haven't I earned it? What will people think if I leave? Does declining mean they won? Camille waited. Then she asked again. Do I want this? No. The answer was quiet, but it was hers. She declined. 2 months later, Camille joined a smaller consulting firm where she spent more time solving problems and less time proving she belonged in the room. 3 months after that, she sat across from a manufacturing executive who wanted an expansion schedule Camille believed was reckless. He pushed. Camille listened. Then she said, I understand why you want it. I still don't recommend it. He frowned. Camille didn't smile. There was nothing to smile about. You're being too conservative. You may be right, but if you want my recommendation, it's still no. I'd rather you be irritated with me today than discover 6 months from now, but I told you what you wanted to hear. The executive stared at the projections. Then he leaned back. Fine, give me the safer version. The meeting ended. Camille gathered her papers and stepped into the hallway. Her new supervisor, Renee, caught up with her. Camille. Her shoulders tightened before her mind could stop them. The body remembered. Renee smiled. Good call in there. He wasn't happy. He doesn't have to be happy. Renee adjusted the folder beneath her arm. He has to trust that we'll tell him when he's about to make an expensive mistake. Then she walked away. Camille stood beside the elevators for a moment. She thought about a legal pad. One word written across it. Warmth. And all the years she had spent believing that word described something missing in her. It hadn't. A week later, Nadia called. I turned down a dinner. Camille smiled. How did it go? I thought I was going to throw up. Camille laughed. I meant after that. Nothing happened. Nothing? They asked why. I said my work on the account was finished and I wasn't available. And? They said, okay. Camille leaned back in her chair. I kept thinking I needed a better reason, Nadia said. You don't. There was a pause. I know that now. After they hung up, Camille looked out her office window. For 6 years, she had believed every boundary required an explanation good enough for somebody else to accept. It didn't. She had never been bad with clients. They had been testing her boundaries, and now she knew the difference. Her story is fictional. The pattern is real. Dear hearts, thank you for spending this time with us in the Velvet Circle. If you haven't already, subscribe and become part of the Velvet Circle. Did you see yourself or someone you care about in this story? Don't stay quiet. Tell someone and ask for help.
Please don't forget to like this video, share with your friends, and leave a comment below. Subscribe, join the family, and let us know where you are watching and listening from, the lessons you learned, and your thoughts on how we can continue improving to give you the very best. Thank you.